We were chasing a train that was over the canyon, and you drove around there with a goddamn gimmick in your left knee and hanging out the window with your speed graphic.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
That has a little... Good morning. Almost every detachment of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police is understaffed in British Columbia, and the blame is being put squarely on the restrictive recruitment policies of the Mounties, whereby it is said that you cannot be accepted as a recruit unless you are 1, a woman, 2, a native Indian, 3, a francophone, 4, have a degree, and if you don't have these capacities, the Mounties can't hire people. Ipso facto, we're short of policemen in areas which need them badly in British Columbia. To discuss this matter with me this morning in Victoria, I have the honour of the presence of the Attorney General of British Columbia, Mr. Brian Smith.
Morning, Jack.
Morning, Mr. Smith. And in Vancouver, a man with a specific problem is the Mayor of Surrey, Don Ross. He's been trying to hire some extra Mounties for many months now. And then, as a very special bonus today, we have the inimitable, indefatigable, quite brilliant reporter, sometime reporter by the name of Ray Munro, the man who caused the Royal Commission of Inquiry into graft corruption, mismanagement and laxity in the Vancouver City Police Force, known as the Mulligan Probe. A man who has figured in many dramatic and daring actions and adventures, including the capture of a rapist in Stanley Park. A guy with an incredible story as a reporter, a guy with whom I've had a few tussles myself in the past, the Ray Munro. But first, after the break, the Attorney General of British Columbia. Good morning, Mr. Smith. Is it correct that there are between 30 and 50 fully trained officers of the RCMP who had left the forces for one reason or another, but who expected to be able to come back, who could be hired now to fill many of the RCMP vacancies in British Columbia?
Absolutely correct. 38, as a matter of fact, Jack, have applied to be reinstated.
Why can't you make sure that these people are hired now so that the likes of Surrey can get the minimum 8 that they need, although I believe the requirements are in total about 32?
Because of the national nature of recruiting for the RCM Police. You see, I don't have any authority to recruit or hire for the RCM Police. I just simply use them as a provincial and municipal force, but they're under the Solicitor General of Canada, and they have a set of hiring procedures which has to take into account the Official Language Act and also their national criteria, because they say that these members that they're hiring in British Columbia may be used anywhere in Canada. So they have these national priorities that have to be taken into account. But
until very recently, it was a clear understanding of members of the force and ex-members, and there are some in British Columbia who say they thought they were coming back, that people who had taken, say, a year out could come back again with their experience and training and go to work. Who changed that policy?
You'd have to ask the Solicitor General that. All I can tell you is that since you and I spoke on Friday, I've spoken with the Solicitor General directly, and also I had a long chat with the Commissioner of the RCMP for Canada yesterday, and I told him that I hoped that we would get this recruiting done quickly, and that we would be mostly concerned with getting people in British Columbia who were qualified by reason of health, interest and skills, and that the other national criteria, which they think are important, would not predominate over the matter of skill, and that would mean that the 38 ex-members could be taken on strength.
But they won't do it.
Well, I think that you're going to find they're a little more reasonable. You know, we've got 115 vacancies in British Columbia now because they took out of British Columbia a number of our members to use for the guarding of embassies in Ottawa, and also all members of that wonderful new mysterious security force have now left the RCM Police. So we got 115 vacancies, and they're going to have to move on them.
115 vacancies. There are 38 officers most of whom will be qualified and they're willing to return to the force, and they won't touch them yet?
Well, I think they'll touch them. I think that the policy is going to be flexible. This is the impression I get, but you should ask Mr. Beattie this when he arrives today.
Yeah, but the fact surely is that the RCMP, now no one's against the bilingualism policy and basic implementation, are we?
No, I don't think so, but you know, it's really concerns us, I guess, that that most of the recruitment that took place during '83 and '84, or 50% of it anyway, was francophone, and during the 1 year there, the really slow year, there were only 3 recruits from British Columbia, which was about 11% of the recruiting, and most of them, the recruits came from Ontario and Quebec, with a large number from Quebec. That's probably because they've got greater numbers, but we've got a lot in British Columbia now who have applied, and 38 ex-members, and I hope they'll get preference.
We better make it clear, though, or we'll be accused of being racist. British Columbia hires 1/3 of the uniformed force. Is that not correct? 3,500 members.
3,500 out of about 15,000 total across Canada.
Or if you take out the security services and the diplomatic people, and you remember that RCMP do not police in Quebec, ordinary policing, or in Ontario, must be closer to 1/4 of the entire force is paid for by British Columbia.
1/4 probably of the active uniform policing force is from British Columbia, and we have not had anything like that share of recruits.
Now, I've got what I believe to be the criteria, and the priority criteria is, am I right? It's female, native, bilingual, francophone, university graduate, although they do hire some small proportion of unilingual anglophone, right?
Correct.
Is it correct that they, however, will hire unilingual francophones and teach them English, but they won't hire unilingual anglophones unless they have to, or teach them French?
Happily, I don't know the answer to that.
What do you mean?
I'm afraid to know the answer to that because I don't do the recruiting. But your criteria are absolutely correct. But those are first criteria, and they depart from those pretty rapidly when they need people in a hurry. And I think that's what they're going to do this year.
So you've put what pressure you can on both Mr. Simmons, the Commissioner, and Perrin Beattie, the Solicitor General. Have you asked them to suspend their very tough recruitment criterion for the moment so that you can fill your vacancies?
Pretty well, yeah. I've said I think the vacancies should be filled, and they should be filled by British Columbians, and those criteria should be secondary to skills, experience, and availability.
So when do you think you'll hear from them? Although if I can get close to Perrin Beattie, I'll put the question directly myself to him.
The recruiting is going on right now. You see, one of the reasons that we have a problem here is there was virtually no recruiting in the RCM police for 2 years because of restraint across the country, and now there's suddenly this need. And in order to meet this need, and Surrey is probably the most crucial example, the mayor has been asking for these 8 men for some time, and we just can't afford to have this become a kind of a affirmative action exercise. We've got to have the men.
In other words, they're trying to bring up the current ratio, I think it's 14% of francophones in the force to 20%. So because of that recruitment policy and the decision not to hire former members, we are going short 115 Mounties.
Well, that's the result of taking members of the force out of British Columbia, but the slowness is to do with that in part. Also, they've got very few women in the force. I think it's right that they should be getting that number up. And also, they desperately need more Native Indian RCMP members, and we totally support that.
In other words, you're not asking them to change the criteria, but merely asking them to go back to the former policy of hiring qualified ex-members to fill some of the vast number of vacancies in the force.
That's right, and not to be too stuck on the criteria where they're faced with people that have good experience and skills.
What, did either one, Simmons or Beattie, give you any deadline for a possible response to your plea?
No, really, they didn't. They just briefed me on what was going on and listened to me, and I told them that I'm reflecting the feelings of a number of mayors and also members of the force, because I've been having informal meetings with RCMP detachments around the province during my pornography tour. And I've been hearing this thing from them too.
I wish you wouldn't say during your pornography.
Well, I know it sounds ominous, but the tour that I'm holding these hearings, I also meet with the police, and not on pornography, but on related matters. And I've heard this concern from them in about 3 or 4 places in the last 2 weeks, Jack.
Mr. Smith, we're going to have you for a full session in a week Tuesday on the 13th, but I'm grateful for your response on this particular problem.
Thanks,
My
Jack.
thanks to the Attorney General. Now let's see how much Mayor Don Ross of Surrey is to blame for the dilatory action and this problem they have in Surrey after the break. Don Ross has been finishing his 3rd term as mayor of Surrey, and Surrey is a place that has had vandalism and policing problems. And I've no doubt that your political opponents, because of an election coming up, will tell me that you're partly to blame because you have dragged your feet on getting the extra police for Surrey in the first place.
Well, certainly it may be something that they might throw around an election platform. It's not true at all. As a matter of fact, we put our request in for 8 additional policemen in January of this year, and certainly the delivery of those policemen is something that we're completely at the mercy of the Solicitor General for. It's not something that we can speed up the process on. We're doing our best to address the situation in talking to the Attorney General. We were expecting Perrin Beatty might be meeting with the Surrey Council today.
He's in town today.
Yes, and we had a request for him to have lunch with our municipal council, but apparently he had other things to do and is not coming to talk to us.
But it's 32 police you need, I understand. Originally you went for 32 police. That's what the head of the detachment wanted, was it not?
Well, when the superintendent came to our budgetary meetings last January, he had a priority list, and his first priority was for 8 policemen. He had a secondary priority for 4 additional and 4 additional in packages of 4, with the ultimate limit that went to about the 3rd or 4th priority up to the 32. Now, our council deliberated over their budget and figured that the taxpayers of our municipality could in fact afford 8 more policemen, and it wouldn't have mattered if we'd have ordered 32. That's an academic question because we didn't even get the 8.
Why can't you get the 8? I mean, it seems ridiculous. We had 115 policemen shot in BC, and the figure that the Attorney General gave me of trained policemen available for rehiring under the old policy of 38 of them right now.
Right.
Why can't we get them?
Well, I understand that the question lies squarely with the Solicitor General.
Well, what's behind it?
Well, just the criteria. And the division here, headquarters in British Columbia, have processed applications from these former RCMP officers and sent down to Ottawa to get okay from the commissioner, but they were refused re-entry into the force on the basis of the criteria. They couldn't speak French.
In other words, the commission, there used to be a policy whereby these ex-officers could be rehired if they'd been out for a year or 2 and were still current and fit and all the rest of it, but that door has been closed in favor of a strict enforcement of the bilingual criteria.
That's the way I understand
Are
it.
you against the bilingual criteria in toto?
No, I'm not in total against it. I think that Canada is a bilingual country, and I think that that's a fair requirement, but we're in a state of emergency in British Columbia with 115 officers short. In Surrey, we were 11. We have 7 promised to us very shortly, and when they come, we'll be in a little better shape, but we'll still be a number of officers short, and there's very well qualified, capable guys out there that could come and help us.
And they just won't give you an okay on it. They could hire them in a flash.
That's right. They could be in the force next week.
So you want to know from Perrin Beatty why they won't go back to the old policy of hiring fully qualified policemen who stepped out for a year or 2?
Yes, I'm a little concerned about hiring practices. We're the largest detachment in Canada with 227 members.
You're the biggest Mountie detachment in the country.
Largest in Canada, and I only know of 2 recruits in the last 5 years that came from our municipality.
What about going to municipal policing? You're paying how much? 90% of the total shot now?
No, by 1990 we will be paying 90% of the total shot. We've been getting a very good contract from the RCMP, federal RCMP. I think that the Attorney General in British Columbia got us the best deal we possibly could, and we get absolutely efficient, fine policing from the RCMP. But I think when the costs get up to 90% and more, we may well be looking at the alternative.
Couldn't you outsmart the Mounties by hiring, say, a dozen special policemen for traffic?
We have special bylaw enforcement officers in our municipality. We have a total of 5 now that are bylaw enforcement officers, and we have a number of civilians working in the RCMP headquarters doing the clerical work and such. We want the high-priced help, the RCMP officers, out on the road where they can do their policing.
Why did you refuse to hear a delegation on the question of putting additional police on a referendum ballot if your problems are all this bad?
Oh, our problems aren't all that bad. There's been a bit of an exaggeration of the crime problem in our municipality by some people that indeed are using that for a political platform. But in fact, if we compared our statistics in Surrey with any other municipality, they wouldn't be out of line at all. And we've got legitimate crime prevention programs proceeding in our municipality that are doing an outstanding job. I participated in this automobile identification, the first in Canada, and this group, we fund them through the municipality, and they're doing an outstanding job of organizing public awareness.
So you're not concerned about the criteria, you're merely concerned about the fact that Perrin Beattie and the Commissioner won't rehire these ex-officers and put the criteria aside for the moment?
It would help us tremendously.
That's your total problem?
Yes.
Well, how are things in Surrey? Although, when's the election?
The election is in a couple of Saturdays, the Saturday after next, the 16th of November.
But you don't regard this as an election issue?
I do not regard it as an election issue. I regard it as a very serious situation that we should attend to in our best fashion, no question.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm going to take some phone calls to Don Ross of Surrey after the break. One of the difficult things about this is if you even dare to complain about criteria, people will turn around and tell you that you're going on an anti-French Canadian kick, which is not the truth.
Not at all.
Not the truth. But this is a ludicrous situation,
Absolutely.
surely to goodness. Quite ludicrous. Go ahead, please.
My question is addressed to Mayor Ross.
Yeah.
I went into the Cloverdale detachment for some information, and I was addressed by a member of the RCMP that couldn't speak adequate English. We're worried about bilingualism. Could we please get some members in British Columbia that can speak English?
Well, I totally agree with you. I understand the bilingual requirement of the RCMP through the Treasury Board states that if you're a Francophone that they will train you in English classes, and if you're Anglophone that they will teach you in French classes. That seems fair to me. But I agree with you, the hiring practices in the past have produced a considerable number of French-speaking members, and I believe that they should be making sure that they have adequate English before they start serving the general public.
One of the new problems now with the 2000 Security Service under federal control and federal statutes, we've got nearly a quarter of all the uniformed Mounties. They don't hire for Quebec and Ontario, and yet the proportion has still got to be 20% across the country.
Yes, it seems rather unfair when the largest detachments are not in Ontario and Quebec.
We haven't got that many bilingual officers in BC, mind you, I don't suppose, do we?
No, I know there's a few. I certainly am not aware of the numbers.
Surely all you need is a French Canadian, is a French capacity.
Right, I agree.
At the moment, certainly. Go ahead, please.
No, I would just like to know, would it be possible for Surrey or maybe the surrounding municipalities to have their own police force like Vancouver? Is this possible?
Would it be possible, or would it be desirable, or would it be both?
I think a regional police force is something that will emerge more and more through the next 5 years in particular as we approach 1990. The municipal police forces around the province now are talking in terms of a fairer deal from the provincial government, and I think they'll be looking at a regional police force.
Hello?
Go ahead.
Yes, I'm just calling with regards to the hiring of unilingual Francophones and teaching them English, and the hiring of unilingual Anglophones and teaching them French. The Solicitor or the Attorney General stated that he didn't know anything about that. The fact is they will hire a female without a university degree who knows no French, send them back east for 6 months, teach them French, and then to depot for 6 months. But they will not do the same for a unilingual male.
You're saying they will not teach a unilingual Anglophone male French?
Will not at all. I have spent over $5,000 already. I take it to the government, but I have to pay for it myself. I know 2 females themselves. Good girls, will do a good job, but have no more qualifications, actually less actual work experience than myself, less education, but got sent back and are being presently paid full salary and are full members of the RCMP.
Are you in the RCMP, or don't you want to say it?
Well, no, I'm an applicant, but I'm an auxiliary with the RCMP, which is my next question for Mayor Ross, how he doesn't seem to utilize his auxiliaries in Surrey, who are fully trained by the provincial government, and for which they pay quite a bit to train them, and they don't seem to be used to their full extent.
We have an auxiliary in Surrey, and the RCMP are recruiting auxiliary officers. It's a pretty careful process that they're going through, but yes, we do use them.
Now, one thing I want to check with you, caller. You are an applicant for the RCMP.
Yes, I am.
You're on the books. You're an auxiliary policeman.
Correct, and I also work as a civilian information officer for them.
As an Anglophone, therefore, you're trying to learn French at your own expense or with a grant.
Pardon me?
You're trying to learn French now.
Yes, I am.
Now, if they took you as an Anglophone, you tell me they would not give you the same French training that they give a female Anglophone.
No, not at all.
And that's official, is it?
Oh, yes, sir. I'd bet my life on that one.
Thank you. Oh, dear, what happened there? My goodness gracious me. Anybody there?
Yes, good morning, Janet.
This is a woman called Cindy Newton. Do you know her?
I recognized her, yes.
What is she to you? Is she opposing you in the elections?
Oh, no, Cindy's not opposing me. She's running on an aldermanic slate in the municipality, though.
She's a woman you accused of trying to blow up the crime thing for her own political purposes.
Well, I believe that to be the case.
Go at him, Cindy.
Yes, I intend to, Jack. Thank you for giving me this opportunity.
My pleasure.
I have 2 statements to make. One, when the Attorney General Brian Smith was here in March, he made a recommendation to Mayor Ross and Council that in the Municipal Act it states a family courts committee shall be appointed by Council on an annual basis. Mayor Don Ross refused that request by Brian Smith. This Council has not adopted that, and to date we still don't have it. The second being, Jack, we, the Surrey Rape Disaster Committee, have 250 foot patrol members throughout our neighborhoods in Surrey who have over the last 2 years been actively involved in the reduction of crime, have successfully done so, and you'll notice that in the statistics for break-in entries in residential area. And this mayor, who is clearly demonstrating the worst and poorest leadership skills I have ever seen, has turned on us, has accused us of using this for political motivations, and our whole group is a front for a political party, on the majority of us being victims of crime. And even worse, Jack, we have tried now for 2.5 months to appear in Council as a delegation, simply asking for 10 lousy minutes of their time to hear what we have done, and both what the provincial and federal government's letters are to us, commending us on our social responsibility in this community.
Okay, I got it. You've had 250 foot patrol people out. You wanted the petition to boost police strength, and you say that the mayor won't even give you 10 lousy minutes.
Not even 10 minutes, Jack.
Well, Jack, first of all, it's not true that I refused to have a family court committee. It's a council appointment, and the council, in fact, I brought it to council, and council refused to deal with it because of the past experiences and the advice that we've had from senior administrative people in the family court system. So it's really not true that I had anything to do with that. As well, I did not refuse any delegation. Personally, that was a council invitation to this group to come to council and committee where we could respond, ask questions, and have sort of a shirt sleeve discussion with them, but they refused to do that because I am sure they only wanted to be to get the publicity in front of the local TV cameras.
You can't blame them, can you? That's the name of the game. If I think you're a disaster, I want to get up in front of council and tell you to your face you're a disaster.
I don't mind that at all.
You should have given them the 10 lousy minutes.
I would have given them the 10, but you know, we have a council policy and I have to uphold a council policy.
Oh. Do you agree with that what he says is correct?
No, Jack, the evening that we asked to appear on October the 7th, a Monday evening, it just turns out that 2 delegations that were already scheduled for that evening did not show up. They debated hearing us or not for 13 minutes. Bob Bowes and Alderman Shrink were the only 2 that would allow us to be heard. They debated that for 13 minutes.
Okay, what are you
running? 2 delegations don't show up. They just slotted us right in. He has no excuse, Jack. And one last and more important thing. Jack, we told Mayor Don Ross 1 year before the B&Es in Surrey hit $600 a month that he was running into a problem here in Surrey. We were identifying the problem. We were seeing it. So are the RCMP. And he again refused that. And now he is using this issue. How conveniently, 2 weeks before the elections, he's plastered on the news.
I asked him to come on the program this morning. He didn't ask me. I must say that. But thank you, Cindy. You made your point.
Did she?
Yeah, she made the point that you wouldn't give her 10 lousy minutes.
I had nothing to do with that.
You're influencing council. I mean, you're a commanding, dominating figure on that council. I'm sure.
That doesn't sound like her other point, though.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, Mayor Ross, we've been in business in Surrey for about 17 years. Been a victim of crime over 20 times, no convictions. I would suggest that the trouble is not police, it's the lack of an effective court system.
I would agree with you, sir. I'm sure that our judicial system does need some beefing up, and I totally agree with your assessment.
Now, would you say the administration of justice itself is to blame for a lot of the troubles?
Well, there's a great deal of permissiveness in our court system and very little follow-through.
Another short segment with Don Ross after the break, and then we'll get to Ray Munro after that. Okay, go ahead to Mayor Ross of Surrey.
I'm a native, and I'm interested in joining the police force, but I don't speak French, and I was wondering what my chances were getting on.
You have good qualifications and a very good chance to get on, because very properly they're trying to increase the number of natives on the force, and they will teach you French.
They will.
Make an application.
Okay, thank you.
Bye. Am I right?
That's right.
Prince George. Go ahead from Prince George.
I had basically two questions. One was for the mayor. Out of the two that he said he knew came from his...
I'm sorry, you have a bad line. I can't hear you.
I said the mayor said he had two coming back to his municipality. Two members of the RCMP from his municipality were returned. I would wager that there was probably personal reasons why, because I believe that there is current policy that members are not returned to their province where they apply from.
No, I said there were two recruits that I was aware of in the last 5 years. There may be three, but very few. It's significant.
You mean two recruits from the municipality of Surrey?
From the largest detachment municipality in Canada.
Anything else, sir?
Also, what I was saying is that, or asking about, is the AG said that they were probably dropping bilingual policy to boost membership. That mean that
No, he didn't. The AG has asked Perrin Beatty and the Commissioner to go easy on the application of criteria for the moment and to consider rehiring some of the former members of the force. I'm afraid you misunderstood us on that one. Go ahead, please.
Oh, Jack?
Yes.
This is Alderman Judy Higginbotham from Surrey.
Alderman Higginbotham. Mm-hmm. Are you for or against the mayor?
I am for the mayor, of course.
All right, keep it brief then, because we don't need
Well, I just wanted to phone up, but I wanted to talk about one of the phone calls that you had earlier when they were talking about coming to open council. Mm-hmm. Last year, I think that Surrey was a little bit besmirched by some of these people coming onto delegations on council and talking about the crime and exaggerating at no end. And we have tried, I think, very hard to address some of the problems, Jack, but in a more responsible manner.
Thank you, ma'am. You can tell that story.
Surely,
we don't need to give her time, too. Go ahead, please.
I agree with the caller for Prince George that even if you hired all BC recruits, that they would not be returned to the province because the RCM hiring practice, you don't come back to your home province.
I think in this case, an effort might be made to locate these people in British Columbia. If we're hiring a quarter of the entire uniformed force, and we've got 38 qualified ex-members here, they would obviously sanely have to be hired for BC, at least in the first instance.
I think you're wrong. But anyway,
Well,
the second thing is...
I'm not wrong. It's my opinion.
Oh, your opinion, yes, but policy...
But the policy is changing.
not to go back to your home province.
Relocation costs are getting so high that there's less and less of that mobility in the force. And I think these officers that are available to us would, in fact, stay in British Columbia.
Here. Go ahead, please.
Yes, good morning, Jack. I'd like to address a problem that happened about a year and a half ago or 2 years ago when the provincial government removed the sheriff's services for processing documents, etc.
I don't...
And that problem was, that duty was placed upon the constables to do.
Okay.
I asked the mayor if that would not have helped them more if the sheriffs would have continued doing it.
Well, we were concerned about that because it was taking up to 3 man-years of officers, RCMP officers' time to do it. But in fact, the operation now is being funded by the Attorney General, so we are able to make it up in this year's budget with another 2 or 3 officers.
Go ahead, please.
Hello?
Yep.
Jack Webster, this is Jean Eddington. I've not always been in favor of everything the council's done, but I have to be in opposition to what Cindy Newton said. You can't believe everything she said. She has in her pamphlet that she is a founder and director of the Newton Business Association, and Jack Webster, I founded that personally.
Did you say Jean Eddington or Jean?
Jean Eddington. I'm the lady that took the Woodwards case against Surrey Council and won.
Thank you, ma'am. Much obliged. Didn't make much sense to me, but she said it. Please go ahead, please.
Yes, Jack, I'm calling about all this media hype we're having about all this crime in Surrey. You know, it's just not true.
Just not true.
Right.
It's not true. We had a problem with some burnouts, right? The Surrey burnouts. First of all, everyone in Surrey wanted to shoot them. Why don't we have more drop-ins?
I think this gentleman is absolutely right. It has been blown out of proportion, but the media hype has had a fair positive effect on our situation in the municipality.
Media hype is not all bad.
It was good for us.
Go ahead, please. That's you.
I'd like to call the mayor's attention to the operation of remand homes in the different neighborhoods of Surrey. I can tell you that we have one here in Fleetwood that should be condemned. It's been drawn to their attention on several different occasions that these kids that are in this home lack attention of every kind. The place is filthy. There's the effluent in the front and effluent going straight onto the grounds in the back with no sewage system whatsoever.
You mean a provincial government remand home for people, yes, youngsters?
There can be 10 to 20 kids in that home.
And no sewage?
No sewage.
There is a problem.
It's also a fire trap.
Just a minute, are you aware of this remand home?
Yes, I'm full aware of it, and our inspectors are aware of it. We have just designated the area, this lady will know, as an urban area. We hope that we will clean up the sanitary conditions, but we certainly need the remand home there.
Whose home is it?
It's the corrections department.
Right.
Yes.
All right, they certainly do need good homes for these kids. These are schools for crime. Now, these two people both have outside jobs. Every time you drop in there, it's filthy, and there's no adult there.
Yeah, but we're aware of the situation there, Jack.
But how long have you been aware of it? And how slow have you been?
Aware of it for at least 2 years.
I've been aware of it for about 6 months personally, but...
Oh, come on. I've got health reports from... no, I haven't.
You may have been aware of it, but I've been only aware of it for 6 months, and believe me, it's under strict supervision.
Now, if we were to look at this place and show what the penalty is, would we be accused of...
Mr. Webster, I would love to show you. I would love to show you other things.
It's called the Castle on 152nd.
The Castle on 150. And if we went out and did a piece on it, would you accuse me of media hype?
No, certainly not. I'm not sure you'd get that much of a story out of it.
No, but we should have a look at it anyway, shouldn't we?
Fair enough.
So that if we can give it media hype, we should give it
Tell
media
me when
hype.
you're going to be there.
No. You don't tell people when you're going to drop in. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Mr. Webster. I'm phoning. A little surprised you haven't heard from anybody from the RCMP. I am an officer of the RCMP, have been for in excess of 10 years. I've spent my entire service in E Division or British Columbia. I'm a little concerned, as are a lot of my fellow officers, with the situation that exists now. There's a growing anti-French movement within the force that can't be ignored. A lot of it has to do with the recruiting policy that is now in place in the RCMP. The situation exists whereby an individual French-speaking, bilingual or unilingual French will come into E Division or British Columbia, spend a few short years here, become bilingual, and insist that he's losing his mother tongue and return to a more comfortable setting in Ottawa or back in Eastern Canada. It's upsetting to me and other officers that this force that was built on tradition, a lot of brothers, cousins, etc., a long line of tradition exists in the RCMP. Change is necessary. However, I think that the very individuals that are implementing the new criteria for recruitment in the RCMP, those very individuals, by their own criteria, could no longer become a member of the RCMP if they were to engage nowadays. Thank you.
Thank you.
Rather disturbing, isn't it?
Yeah, I think I get his message. We'll take a call from the Surrey rate person and we'll call it a day.
Good morning.
Good morning. You're on.
Yes, Jack. I'd like to address two questions to the mayor. If crime is being blown out of proportion, I'd like him to answer why car theft is up 68% in Surrey. And the other question or point I would like to make is that it was the RCMP who called on Surrey residents for our help. And if, in fact, we are blowing the situation out of proportion, why then did the RCMP ask for our help?
Well, number one, I question the 68%. I'm not in a position here to pull out the statistics that we get from the RCMP to allay that. And the other thing is that I would hope that our RCMP would encourage as much public participation as possible, that they would give them in-home instructions to observe and patrol and report. I'm totally in favor and support the RCMP recruiting our citizens to give them a little more eyes and ears in the municipalities. I like the program. It doesn't have to be a program of strictly the Surrey Crime Prevention Society. There are many very worthwhile observation groups in our municipality, and I support all of them.
Why then did you refuse them to appear in council?
I didn't refuse them.
Yes, you most certainly did it.
I certainly didn't.
Council refused them.
Right.
Okay, they were leaving.
In the evening. They were welcome to come to the afternoon session.
So the score on your 8 must-have policemen are that the Attorney General has spoken to BT. You haven't been able to get hold of BT. I'll try to get hold of BT.
Good.
And see if we can get the 8 guys locally hired from experienced policemen.
And I'll thank you for that.
Conservative government isn't exactly known for swift decisions on a common sense basis, is it? And I shall be back with the Ray Munro, a voice and a ghost from my past, after the break. I joined the Vancouver Sun at the beginning of October 1947, and I was immediately met by a whirlwind of a man who was in the process of cutting ties off everybody in the newsroom. He was in a devil-may-care mood. And this is the man, Ray Munro, who was, I think I can say without contradiction, the most exciting reporter-photographer this town has ever seen. He caused the Mulligan Police Inquiry, which reshaped the entire police force, and he was involved in many other dramatic incidents. Before we get to the Mulligan probe, let's talk about the Stanley Park caper, when you and Don McLean did your public duty most effectively. Give me it.
Well, I learned from an acquaintance that the rape ring was operating in Stanley Park. My investigation showed that a minimum of 113 women had been horribly sexually abused by the same 4 men in a continuing 1 year and 8-month period.
In Stanley Park?
In Stanley Park. And
near the old
police,
tree?
Yes, and the police had hidden every report and had 1 person on duty in the park at night. That is all. So I went out alone for several nights, rolling the window down, turning the radio on softly, and figure I'll have a shot at the 4 of them if they come to the car, which they didn't.
You were armed?
Of course.
Illegally, but armed?
No, I had a permit. I had a permit to carry a gun. Always had a permit in Vancouver to carry a gun.
45?
45.
Right.
Blow them right out of their socks, okay? And I sensed on the last night that their presence was near, but they didn't come to the car. Then I understood why. They wanted a woman. Well, I couldn't take one. I got Don McLean, slipped a red wing on him, red wig and little boobies and everything inside his...
Don McLean of the Vancouver province at that time.
Great fella. And gave him a policeman's billy, and they struck the first night. Well, the result was kind of a melee, and I shot at the fellow who was leading the gang, and as he passed by a tree, but it was pitch black, and the shot hit the tree. A large piece of bark came off, and it hit him in the side at the precise moment he heard the report. And he thought he'd been shot, and he fell down. Well, we had a little struggle there. And McLean went single-handedly with just a club after the other 3 into the dense bush. Well, eventually we got him, and I locked him in the trunk of the car.
How many did you actually catch?
One. He got the heaviest sentence ever meted out for rape in Canada, 16 years and 10 lashes. And the other 3 were known to the police and ourselves, and there wasn't enough evidence to charge them. But they lived in their own private hell for all those years because John Kenneth Clark, the ringleader, he made a deal with them. They had to support his 2 wives and his children without complaint for the entire time he was in jail, or he would take them in for 16 years.
And you also did something.
What?
You
What did
used
I
to
do?
go and sit outside the house of one of them. Or
Oh,
both of them.
certainly. Oh, yes. I'd follow him to work and sit there and watch him. Oh, for hours, sure. I was waiting for him to come to me.
You were an incredible fellow. Just briefly, sketch me some of the things you were a fighter pilot in the war.
Yes.
Oh, yes. And you
Yes.
covered the not Doukhobor, Sons of Freedom troubles up at Kistova
Oh, sure.
by plane.
Oh, yeah.
Is that not correct?
Yeah, that's all in there.
And claimed you were shot at by the...
No, I didn't claim.
Freedom
The
Arts.
RCMP claimed, not me. The RCMP Kelowna found that 2 bullets went in. One went in from a low angle and hit the wheel and shredded on the inside and stayed inside. The shell was still inside. And then another came up through the open window, maybe a long ways away from me, and took the perspex section of the roof right out of the airplane. And it was night, early in the morning, 4 o'clock. So I had to fly across the mountains and land at Kelowna, and you know, a little touchy landing.
Okay, there was the Air Force is a fighter pilot. Many times did you crash?
3.
3 times. Then there was, did you come from there to the Vancouver Sun?
No. I came back and I was prohibited from flying for medical reasons. I spent a long time in hospital from these crashes, a lot of broken bones and so forth. And I was put on the reserve for flying. And that time you could leave, go to civilian, and come back if you were called. So I went to the Toronto Star as a cub reporter at $17 a week with Earl Smith, whom you know. And I stayed there for about 5.5 years, and then my wife died, and I left the Star. And then I went to the Globe and Mail and spent a year as the staff pilot for the Globe and Mail. And then I came west, a year at the Sun, 7 years at the Province, and then I went back east again.
A year at the Sun,
That was
7
a
years
great
at the
year,
Province.
great year, the Sun year.
Yeah, year at the Sun, 7 years at the
Yes.
Province. And then some time with a publication called Flash.
Never worked for it. Never had a cent from him, ever.
Supplied material to them.
Yes, I made a deal with a publisher to get the story published. He would publish everything I wrote verbatim if I would give it to him. And I only worked for him for 3.5 weeks.
And you went to the story, you went to the Flash with this material because the province had refused to publish your stories about the police department in Vancouver.
Yeah. I even tried to buy a newspaper, the Burnaby Courier, to publish it. Couldn't do it.
At that time.
Couldn't raise the money, no.
And looking at the net effect of the Mulligan probe which you caused, we'll do that after the break. In 1954 or 1955, and I remember it well, I covered for 54 days, verbatim shorthand to radio, the proceedings of the Royal Commission of Inquiry into allegations of graft corruption, mismanagement and laxity in Vancouver City Police Force. Reginald H. Tupper, QC, was the commissioner. What was your involvement in that, Mr. Munro?
A witness.
How did you come to start that whole inquiry, Mr. Munro?
I worked 4.5 years gathering evidence, not just information, but evidence, against primarily Chief Constable Walter Hugh Mulligan and William Cooper, a businessman who was head of some of the rackets, and several other senior police officers.
And in the course of that inquiry, one police officer attempted to commit suicide by the name of Len Cuthbert, and one did commit suicide by the name of Harry Whalen.
True.
What was it that you... Why did you publish in Flash and not in the Province?
Province and the Sun. I even went to the Sun after. I left the Province because they refused to publish the story. It wasn't just them. They got the directors of Southam's in from the East, and they had a meeting, and I wasn't privy to the reasons, but I assume it was something to do with the image of the newspaper and perhaps advertising. I'm not too sure. And I suggested that I couldn't work for a newspaper that didn't serve the public 100%. It was the guardian of the morals of the public, and I left. I offered the whole story free to the Sun. They took the same route. I got
the lawyers turned thumbs down on it.
Oh, everybody did. Oh, absolutely.
Because nothing has been proven to this day in a court of law against the principal person accused in the
Well, they
Mulligan
had never
probe.
stood before a court of law.
Why not?
I don't know why.
Matter of fact, the principal, you attended the hearings as well as I did.
Yes, I did.
Each and every one of those days. And we
Yes.
both remember the day when Mr. Mulligan had been saying for a long while, I want to get on the stand and get this over with.
Which he never did.
He left the inquiry after you got into a great tussle with his counsel.
That's right.
Chief, who was Tom Norris, QC,
That's
later Mr. Justice Norris of the Court of Appeal.
Mm-hmm.
What were your broad allegations? And as I stressed, nothing was ever proven in court against the police department in those days.
Chief Walter Mulligan was an ally of criminals. He took orders from the head of what you could refer to as a syndicate, a non-drug dealing syndicate. Because even publicly, I defended Mulligan when it was suggested he was involved in drugs. And I publicly suggested that it was impossible. His character would not permit him.
But I remember well the evidence of that court, and there was nothing but fairly nebulous evidence, except for the case of the woman who appeared in disguise.
Well, that was my clincher.
Who was she?
Helen,
Don't use her real name today if it's identifiable.
Use her maiden name because that's the one that was used in the court record. And you can't identify her because she married after that. It was Helen Douglas. We won't even mention the middle name. And that's why she came with a different wig on and heavily veiled and was permitted to do so. It wasn't that she was in fear of her life. It was that she didn't want the tenor of her life disrupted and maybe shame brought upon her family.
It always struck me as quite appalling that the commissioner allowed this woman in disguise, wearing a, what do you call these things, a net,
yes.
a net, a veil,
yes.
and a wig,
yes.
and yet she made certain damaging allegations
yes.
against the chief
yes.
without ever having her proper name. Was that not most grossly unfair of the commissioner?
Not at all.
If you accuse me of
it
something,
is not
I want to see my accuser.
It's a commission of inquiry. It was not a court. He did not have the powers to sentence. He did not have the powers to judge. He had the powers to report. And he should have taken some lessons from you.
No, nor did he have the power to cite you for contempt when
yes,
Tom
he did.
Norris asked that you be cited for contempt for printing something in Flash which he regarded as scurrilous about his family.
Yes, it wasn't scurrilous. It was a statement of fact. While he was attacking me over drinks in his private club and discussing internal matters which only he and the court officials should have been privy to, he was, you know, into the sauce on occasion in his private club, having private chats. And a couple of these people came to me and they told me what was said. So I went for his throat.
You certainly
And I got
did.
him. And he said, I'll leave this court, I'll never return. And he slammed down the papers and he was gone. And Mulligan had no counsel. Then he got Jay Gould. And I went for Jay Gould, and Jay Gould threw down the papers and said, we'll both leave and never come back. And you know where Mulligan went?
California.
Monrovia.
Monrovia.
That's where he went.
Don't say that with glee and pleasure. It's purely a coincidence. Matter of fact, Mr. Mulligan left the country while they were seeking him with a subpoena to keep him here as a material witness. Am I correct?
That's correct. He went out the back door of the embassy, United States Embassy, while the subpoena went in the front door.
Cuthbert.
Sad case. He was a nice man.
What was Cuthbert's part in that?
Well, the chief called him in and said, look, here's a deal. You know that there's a few people who need some help I do some work for. They're running some clubs, drinking and gambling, nothing more than that, not prostitution or drugs. And there's a lot of problems here. There's not, there's some other outfits that we don't want running. Here's a list of them. Close them down. Leave them open unless they're in this list. You're going to pick up some money. It'll be in an ordinary brown paper bag. Bring it in. We'll spread it out on the desk. I'll take half, you take half. In actual cash. Go back and give what you want to your men, and that's all there is to it. He tried before with Sergeant Leatherdale, and Leatherdale turned him in. And the prosecutor and the mayor were privy to this, and they didn't do anything. They let Mulligan know, and they knew what he was doing. But he was taking orders from William Cooper, the same as Ralph Campney, as Minister of National Defense, was taking orders from William Cooper in this city. He owned the Quadra Club.
That never came out in court.
It's in the book.
It's in the book, but it never came out in court.
Of course it didn't. Now,
my memory is still pretty good.
Now you listen
and
to
I
this.
remember Leatherdale, and I remember Cuthbert.
Now, I did my research. Cooper and Campney, in their own names, owned all of those white surplus buildings under Burrard Bridge and were leasing them to the federal government at such money.
I hope you've got the right names.
Now listen to me. They were leasing them at such an annual rate that in 3 years they got enough from the government of Canada to pay for them, and my story caused a Senate investigation, erupted onto the floor of the House of Commons, and made 2 8-column headlines in both city newspapers here stating exactly what I said. Then I found out that Campney, in his own name, owned buildings leased to the federal government as post offices. Now this is the power. Campney was powerful because Cooper was his bagman.
Now, why and when did Cuthbert shoot himself?
He shot himself.
He was a sergeant
because
in the police force who testified. Cuthbert was a sergeant.
Yeah, he was.
Who testified at the Mulligan probe about this matter you were telling us about a moment ago.
Yeah.
I can't remember when he shot himself.
Very simple. I went to his home, knocked at the door. The blinds were drawn. He opened the door. He was in his undershirt. He was not himself. And I said, I want to talk to you, Len. He said, what do you want? I said, you're in trouble right now, and there's nothing I can do about it. Now, get in the car with me. We'll drive to the airport. I'll fly over to see Bonner, who's waiting for you. McMorrin will come with us, who was Crown Prosecutor at the time. And you tell it to them, and everything will be okay, because you're only a small part of it. He said, I can't do it. Well, I said, you're going to go to jail. Well, he said, I can't do anything about it. Well, I said, if that's the lack of courage you have, what you should do is stick your gun in your mouth and blow your goddamn head off. Now, I'm sitting out front for 10 minutes. If you're not out in 10 minutes, you better do something. And I left. Next morning, he went in and put the muzzle up to his heart, pulled the trigger, and the 1 in a million chance, Jack, his heart constricted on the beat and the bullet touched the edge of it. And that's why he lived.
Now, you don't look good in that story, Raymond.
I don't care.
Here you saying to a guy who's under stress and trouble, you might as well put a gun in your mouth and blow your head off.
Absolutely. That's the temper of the time.
Misses his heart.
That's how weak he was. He was a weak man.
Gosh, you didn't have much compassion in your chest in those days.
For gangsters who are raping the city, who take money and fail to protect the citizens, you'd have eaten them alive if you had this job then.
More with Ray Munro.
Are you getting soft in your old age?
Yes. Jesus. I don't like to grind people into a crowd 40 years later.
Oh, my Lord. Governments change, but people don't, Jack Webster.
After the break. Ray Munro. There's more in this book than the Mulligan probe, but that's the matter which will grab eyes, I should imagine, in British Columbia.
I think the police officers of this force should have a read of this, because I doubt if there's an honest cop in town.
No?
Right now. When I say, no,
don't
just a
be
minute.
Stupid.
Now, just
a minute.
minute.
Take that back.
Just
right
I won't do
away.
it. No, and I'll tell you why. As soon as a man takes in uniform, takes a cup of coffee from a restaurant owner and doesn't pay for it, that's the lousy start of it. Because then the fella says, every time you come in, I have to ring it into the cash register. Then he has breakfast and he doesn't pay. It's happening right this morning. And then the restaurant...
You have
just
no
a minute.
authority whatsoever to make such a damnably slanderous statement right now.
Listen, just about 4 years ago, I was hired to clean up a police department.
In the East.
All right, no different. Police are police. They're still human beings, and human nature prevails. And then the restaurant owner says, listen, I've got some stuff in the trunk. I know it's no parking. Do you mind if I pull the car up and leave it a few minutes? The first thing you know, it's there all day, and the policeman's taking his wife in for a snack. And that's wrong.
When you and I came to this town in 1947...
You're shouting at me,
I am
Jack.
shouting.
You're shouting.
I'll give you a couple of facts. Most of the newsagent shops were bookie shops.
Right.
Most of the so-called private clubs were illegal cocktail bars.
Right.
The steam baths were, in effect, places of assignation.
I wouldn't know.
You knew that as well as I did.
One.
You know there was illegal gambling all over this town.
Yes.
Wide open gambling.
Right.
In all kinds of places.
Yes.
And I went around this town and I did stories on the apparent breaches of the law and breaches of the criminal code.
Yes.
That has long gone. You can go into this town right now and you will find this town is as clean as a whistle for two reasons. One of which is that the whole type of person has changed. Today's policeman is, and I say this without insulting my old friends, better educated, more sympathetic to the cause of decency and honesty, and there's no need for you to give the impression that we're some kind of Boston or New York police department that lives off two-bit graft.
I
Take
didn't
it back.
say that. I won't. I didn't say it, and I explained it if you were listening. But your mind was racing ahead so you could attack me on it, you see?
You've gone to the purest bit that anyone who takes this to the most trifling
Well, where
cup
do
of
you
coffee
all right.
is dishonest.
Where do you draw the line? Now, you tell me, is it 3 cups a day? Is it 1 meal a week and 2 cups of coffee? Tell me what it is.
It's such a specious, stupid
Is it?
argument, I won't even pay attention to it. Now I've lost my place. God save us all. Tell me about your balloon flights.
I was in Texas, in Austin, receiving the state of Texas honor from the governor at a cocktail party. I was put in a conversation with a chap who was a lieutenant commander
I'm wondering about
in the Naval Reserve who averred that he was talking about aviation.
You're a bloody troublemaker, Munro, of the worst order.
You know who this chap was? He was the director of public safety for the city of Dallas when the president was shot, so I assumed he wasn't all that bright to begin with. And he was telling me how great Texans were, that they held a national aviation record for ballooning. I investigated and I found out, I'd never flown a balloon, that there were 28 world records held by various countries. Then I found out that Canada in its history had never held an official world record in aviation. So I had 3 big balloons made, Canada 1, 2, and 3, learned how to fly them. And then
This is true.
I
This is
took
true.
on
This is true.
every one of the countries. And I stayed with it without any financial support. It's just in the spirit of adventure until I had brought to Canada all of the 28 world records.
Yeah.
And then I broke my own records. And the last challenge was to take this balloon across the Irish Sea because in 140 years, all who tried had failed. So I tried it, and I went down about 30 miles off the coast of Wales in January. Survival time's 25 minutes. I'm in the water an hour and a half. I don't know anything about it. I got hypothermia. I wake up in the hospital. I'm in there a couple of days. I phoned Gordon McGregor, who was president of Air Canada. I said, for Christ's sake, get Canada 2 over to me tomorrow. So he sent a truck out to my home, put it on an airplane, and flew it over. And 2 days later, the big Canada 2's there. So I got out the hospital window in some fishing garb, got on a boat at night and got him to take me across the Irish Sea to Dublin because there was a hurricane coming up from the South Atlantic. And they estimated the winds over Eastern Ireland between 65 and 70, which is about 2 miles less than hurricane.
Right.
So I figured if I could stay ahead of the frontal roll, I could make it. Well, I didn't, except it caught me. And it swallowed me up in ice and darkness, took me up to 13,000 feet. The flame went out a few times. I finally got thrown out near Mount Scafell, the highest mountain in England. And the only reason I was found in that lonely spot, the police inspector from Whitehaven Force was out looking in the sky for the balloon, like all of the west coast of England was on the alert. The lifeboats were ready. And it made full page ones, the entire page of the 2 greatest newspapers in the world. Not the person, but the fact that a fellow had failed and wouldn't quit. So he saw me plunge out of this muck, slam into the side of he looked at binoculars, the 1,400-foot cliff, and it threw me overboard. But I had tied my wrist to the equipment, knowing I was going to die, and if they found the equipment, they find the body, the estate could be settled. When I'm hanging underneath it, going like an express train, I don't remember crashing. They found me in a bog, face down in a bog, and when they lifted me out, the imprint of my body, that's how hard I hit, and the balloon was long gone.
Just for the record, I want before I go to phone calls, from the book. Tupper, R.H. Tupper, concluded that former Chief Walter Mulligan bolted the probe and fled to the States because he knew he couldn't clear his name.
Yeah, that's the statement.
That he accepted bribes for the purpose of dissuading him from his duty. That Cuthbert accepted bribes from gamblers and shared the monies. That ex-detective Jack Whalen's testimony of the stolen piggy bank was untrue. And that the allegations against Cooper, who was conspicuous by his absence, must be accepted. What was the piggy bank story? Now, there were 2 policemen. There was Jack Whalen, the ex-policeman, and Harry Whalen, the inspector.
Brothers.
They were brothers. Yeah. What was the story of the piggy bank?
Jack Whalen was a detective, and his partner was Walter H. Mulligan. They answered a call to a theft from an apartment down in the Beaches, the building that old Torchy Anderson used to live in. They went inside, and during that time, while the woman was in another room, either Mulligan or Whaler, I don't know which, saw this big, you know, ceramic bank and felt it was so heavy that they just took it. And when they got out in the car, they broke it and they shared the money. That's all there was to it. Nothing more.
But that was found to be untrue.
Well, no, that's what Tupper said.
That's what Tupper said. That's good enough for me. And of course, Mr. Mulligan, I must put on the record, didn't face any charges at any time.
That's correct.
Right. Now, let's go to the phones. This might be interesting.
One never knows. Walter might be on the phone.
The last time I did a story...
I'd like to talk to him, you know.
Oh, one other thing I forgot to ask you. What happened to Harry Whelan?
Harry? What do you mean, Harry?
Jack Whelan.
I have no idea.
No, but Harry Whelan, the inspector. That was one of the great dramatic events of the
He wasn't inspector. He was deputy chief. And then he was demoted to superintendent of the uniform branch.
He was demoted because of an incident involving a little piece of driving with some liquor on him on the way back from Peace
Every
Poker.
year they had a police golf tournament down at Peace Arch. And he got into the sauce, climbed in his car, and he was stopped on the highway, and that was all there was to it. But Mulligan didn't want him, and he used that, rightly so,
to demote him. Did he not kill himself during the inquiry?
Well, you see, I'll take your word for it from your investigation about all of the police reports.
No,
I always
just
felt
there,
that they could never. Two separate neighbors, without talking to each other, saw a man running from the house moments after the shot was heard. There was no attempt to locate this person, and they just washed it. And I will never know whether he killed himself or whether he was murdered. I don't know. I wouldn't surmise.
You bring back a lot of memories to me, I'll tell you, including the time I was doing a panhandling feature on Granville Street, dressed as a shabby rubby-dub in 1947, and suddenly I feel the police hand on my shoulder. You had called the police.
Certainly.
Although you were the photographer taking
That's
the
right.
picture of me.
Yeah, why not?
After the break. You know, just for old time's sake, weren't you a partner with Art Jones in Art Ray?
Yes. Do you know how we left the sun?
No.
We climbed at night, had a couple of drinks, climbed up the top of the building, up the cupola, up into the dome itself, went on the outside of the dome, which is at about 15 stories above the street, to screw out enough light bulbs to spell Art on one side and Ray on the other. Well, we kept dropping the light bulbs, and we didn't know they were bouncing from there to the street. Then we see red lights, hear the sirens, and we thought there was a big fire in someplace. So we rushed down to cover it, and they were there because reports were coming in that there were explosions in the street, and they were coming from the top. And that's how we left the sun.
That'd be when, about 50?
1948.
48, that's right.
Yeah.
Go ahead from Kelowna.
Hello, Jack.
Yeah.
Jack, I just haven't heard from you in 34, 35 years, and Ray for 36 years, and I would just like to test his...
Who is it?
Memory. Cease Paul, ex-member of the force.
Very well.
Yes,
I was with you on the big bank hold-up when you shot a fellow by the name of Harrison almost between the eyes, blew the back of his head up 16 steps. It bounced off the door of the bank, rolled down the steps. The little boy's name was Jackie. He held as a human shield. You had 18 inches to hit, and you hit it.
At the corner
What a memory.
corner of Commercial and First Avenue.
Northeast corner, you were on a motorcycle, you stepped off the motorcycle while it was still moving. But the funny part of it is that I didn't realize till a couple of minutes later, I was in the car, not quite in the line of fire, but across the street was one telephone pole, and I saw a form behind it, and it was Boomer Warwick, an off-duty traffic policeman without a gun, so he did the smart thing, he stayed directly behind the telephone pole.
But Cease pulled his gun, shot the guy between the eyes, while the man was
Well,
holding...
the fella shot 3 people in the
Oh,
back.
yeah, I remember that.
Cease, you received the King's Commendation for brave conduct. Then you received an award, a cash award, and then you gave it to the Police Benevolent Association, and then for reasons I didn't inquire into, you subsequently left the force and went into business. Am I correct?
That's true, Ray, and what really influenced me to leave the force at the time was the atmosphere of the force prior to the Mulligan investigation.
It was a bad time for everybody prior to the Mulligan
The
investigation.
second book, it was too much, the first book. The second book, which is all done and ready for print, details that entire Harrison Bank hold-up and the role you played, including the picture of Harrison lying dead with a hole in his head and your foot on his chest with your black legging, with your right foot, incidentally.
Ray, you're incredible. And it's wonderful to have an opportunity to say hello to you again.
Thank you very much. See you sometime.
Story of yours, Ray, if I'm correct, went right to the Times, did it not? And were you not beat out by the fact of a rescue somewhere east of Hope, or otherwise you would have won the top story of the year? Is that not correct?
That was an occasion when Ray discovered, in flying his own plane, a fella called Grant.
Grant and Curie, that was the biggest air search in Western Canada.
Ho Chi Minh.
No, they crashed on near Ho Chi Minh on Jack Mountain. But the weather was bad, they crashed, no one could find them, and I stayed with it for the entire search day and night, and I found them on the 7th day. Yes, that's correct.
Mm-hmm. Was Paul St. Pierre with you?
No, he was with the Sun, I was with the province.
Oh, that's right.
I was staff part of the province at that time. Thank you for remembering. That's also in the first book, I think.
Thanks for calling.
Thanks for having me, Jack.
Bye.
I appreciate it.
Bye.
Bye.
Go ahead from Victoria.
Good morning, Mr. Webster.
Morning.
Enjoyed this conversation you've had with Mr. Munro exceedingly. But there's one point that a statement he made right at the beginning concerning the sentence to the leader of the rape group, 16 years and 10 lashes.
Mm-hmm.
When I was a laddie in Scotland, probably about the same age as yourself, he used to talk about continuously about the birch being administered in the borstal. And this was a single thing that
we don't need to
age
go.
was.
No, I don't want to compare medieval punishments of yesteryear. No. I'm glad we stopped the lashing, and I'm presuming you are too.
Listen, when you leave here, you can get a job teaching used car salesmen how to be tough, okay?
Go ahead, please.
Hello?
That's you?
Yes. Most of my questions have been answered while I was waiting, and I just wanted to ask Mr. Munro, didn't there seem to be a period when Mr. Mulligan had 2 or 3 days where the subpoenas were being delayed and not being served?
Yes, he did. And Jack, you could answer that better as a reporter. I was a bystander at that time.
No, I remember well how the probe had dragged out, and I'd say without fear of contradiction that it was not very well handled by the man in charge of it. The whole thing had certain elements of unfairness about it, you must confess. Is that not so?
That's true.
What should have been done was that there should have been a proper back door, normal police investigation, and charges laid if charges were to be laid.
Correct.
Because that became a whole paintbrush of innuendo and whatnot. I remember well policemen being asked the following question: what did you hear of rumors of graft corruption, mismanagement, and laxity?
Jack, they had to protect...
I don't remember. I can't recall. I don't remember. I can't recall.
They had to protect the offices. Wismer, Boss Johnson, you're talking the heavies. They had to protect the office that they held.
I don't think any attempt was made to protect anybody. I think the device of a Royal Commission was wrong, though, for the whole thing. Wrong one. Go ahead, please.
I just wanted to recall to Mr. Munro, good to see him again. I shared a cubbyhole in office with him in the North Shore many years ago. He was being transferred, taken out of exile and brought back into the big city.
Was that you, Ed?
Yes.
Ed Cosgrove.
Yes.
Took the time to brief me on how to use a speed graphics, which I'd never touched before in my life. And he sat down and he worked out every possible shot I could make with a number 12 bulb. And about a month later, a major story broke in North Vancouver, and suddenly I found myself knee-deep in the province stars. And it was Munro who sat down and made sure that, because I was the first reporter on the spot, and I was a cub, really, that I got the byline and I got the main story in the paper. All these other guys were swarming all over me, with their knowledge, and I just wanted to say that, it's sort of another aspect of his nature, aside from the,
Oh, he's flamboyant. He's
nice to hear from you, Ed.
Oh, you were sort of an inspiration at that time, and I think...
Oh, that's enough. I'll have to cut you off now, Ed. Go ahead, please. Where are you?
Hello, is that me?
That's you, ma'am.
Yeah. I'd like to know what this bozo thinks he's doing when he calls my husband or accuses my husband of taking graft.
Madam, if he's taken a cup of coffee and not paid for it because he's wearing a uniform, then he's a thief to the degree of the cup of coffee, and that's final.
But you put it over every single police officer. You put it over every single police officer.
Balloon Canada 2 to
I
go
did.
to England on Air Canada.
I paid for it.
Oh, come on now. Don't tell me you have never taken grass.
I didn't say that, but I'm not wearing a police uniform, and I've never been employed by the public in that line
You
either.
should have said some police
How
officers do.
dare you call my husband that kind of a thing?
She's right. Apologize.
No.
I think he
Forget
deserves
it.
to apologize to every member of the police force
I'll
in
apologize
Vancouver.
to anybody who hasn't taken anything free because they're a police officer.
Well, that's like saying, first of all, that we're all criminals unless we make it
No, we're talking now. We're
subject to
talking
your
about the people who are supposed to set the standards for law keeping. Set the standards, and the moral standard and the legal standard.
If I had a pair of scissors, I'd cut your tie off.
Oh, I'd do more than cut his tie off.
That was a famous occasion when he was going around the office cutting off ties. He came to me, I grabbed my scissors, I said, cut my tie off and I'll kill you. Ho, 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 ho. You were tough in those days.
Was I?
Scared me half to death.
I did.
Are you doing any autographing?
No.
I'd love to give a plug so all your old friends could go out and see. You're not going to be autographing books?
No, I haven't got the time. I have to go to Edmonton.
No, I wouldn't dare. I wouldn't dare.
Well, if you've got...
no, I'm talking about cutting your tie off.
Well,
my thanks to Raymond
You've got
Rowe
the
offer-
money.
offer
It's a
of
very
his-
expensive tie. You cut it off, you write the check.
After
the
break.
choice is yours. You can look at the link.
The name of the book is The Sky is No Limit by Munro. Tomorrow, Jack Heinrich, Minister of Education, and the acting ombudsman, Peter Bazowski. Should be a bright morning. So that's Heinrich, Bazowski, Webster, Education, Allied Problems, Troubles and Complaints. Tomorrow at 9 a.m. precisely. Jack Heinrich, Education Minister, with Webster at 9 a.m. precisely. Yeah, I'm going to be there. Yeah, I'm going to that at 12 noon.
Is there any chance you can put piece together with the whole, some of Smith, some of Ross, if he's relevant? And
You mean to interview him?
Huh?
To interview BT?
Well, and Dubiti. I mean, just knock him off the presser. I don't know what you're planning to do.
Yeah, I'm
but
planning to knock him off at the presser.
So can you do a little rap for us outlining the issue and the...
About the bilingualism?
Yeah.
That's the only one I'm interested in.
Yeah, that's all.
Yeah, I'll do a wrap around for it, sure.
Okay, so it would include Smith from this morning. I mean, this whole story, right? Whatever that...
Yeah.